Hello, everybody. Welcome, 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 welcome. Wow, so many people. It's so great to see you all. I'm going to be speaking in English. Voy a estar hablando en inglés en general, pero les quería compartir this. I just wanted to share with you this information about interpretation. Esta es la información sobre interpretación. Si quieren escuchar en otro idioma, if you want to listen in another language, you can choose the channel in your Zoom bar. Pueden elegir el canal en su barra and you will hear the interpretation. Y así van a escuchar la interpretación. So I'm just going to give you a minute, everybody, to choose your channel. Les voy a dar un minuto para elegir el canal de interpretación. We are recording this call. Estamos grabando esta llamada. So if you want to make yourself anonymous, switch the video off. That's good. Así que si no quieren salir de la grabación, cierren el video. And while we wait just a little bit longer for everybody to go on the interpretation channel, I'm just going to do a brief welcome. Isa will introduce us later to the rest of the event. So my name is Elena Suarez-Val. I'm one of the co-leads of Data Against Feminicide, co-hosts of this event with the Feminist AI, the Latin American Feminist AI Network. Isa will tell us more about this in a minute, but I wanted to tell you that we have this directory and we usually open this up in every event that we do so that people can share their information there and meet others that they're interested in working in the same subject of data and feminicide, and in this case, technology as well, AI and feminicide. So I've just opened it for editing. If anybody wants to add their information there, you just choose one of these slides here and then you can copy it, duplicate it, and add your own information. So that's just for a second while we wait for a few more people to arrive. And I will pass on to Isadora. So welcome, everybody, and I'll see you in a little bit later during the event.
Thank you, Elena. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. I'm Isadora Crushane. I'm an associate professor at Queen Mary University of London, and I'm also one of the co-leads of the Data Against Feminicide research project alongside Elena Suarez-Val, who just spoke, Catherine D'Ignazio, and Silvana Fomega. So the Data Against Feminicide project is a project that seeks to support the work of activists that produce data against feminicide across a variety of contexts. We are a participatory research and technology design project, and we've been going on for, I think, almost 6 years now. So every year, our project has organized an annual event in November to bring together what we call a community of practice of people that are working at the intersection of data, technology, and activism against gender-related violence and its lethal expression, feminicide. So this year, we're really excited to have organized the annual event in collaboration with Paola Ricaurte and the Latin America and Caribbean Feminist AI Network, which is a network that seeks to bring together feminist, anti-colonial, human rights-based, and community-led perspectives with the goal of advancing democratic, diverse, and context-aware AI governance, innovation, and research. So with this event, and Elena, if you can pass to the next slide, with this event, what we wanted to do was to create a space for dialogue about the development and proliferation of artificial intelligence technologies and what they mean for feminist activism broadly, but also for struggles against gender-related violence and feminicide in particular. So I guess recognizing that AI systems are largely being developed in extractive and exploitative ways, that they can be biased towards marginalized communities and reproduce inequalities, and that they have harmful environmental effects, what we wanted to do is think together about what it means to approach AI from a feminist perspective, right? So what are frameworks and practices that can help us think through this question? But also, when might refusal of these technologies be the most appropriate approach? So with these questions in mind, this is how we've organized and the plan for this session. Yeah, great. So we will start with a conversation about feminist perspectives on AI between Anita Gurumurthy and Paola Ricaurte. I will introduce them both in a second. And then we'll follow this with a Q&A and then a short break so that we can all stretch and get some tea or coffee and so on. And then after that, we'll have some brief project spotlights with different projects that are trying to enact some of these feminist AI approaches in practice. We will create space also after the project spotlights for interactivity and for dialogue, and we have an activity that's planned for that to support more collective discussion. Before I move forward, I just want to say that we have with us today Sofi Donner. She's an illustrator, a visual interpreter, and she will be capturing themes that emerge during the event and will show us the sketch of her visual illustration at the end. So without further ado, let me turn it over to our first session. We are very excited to have Anita Gurumurthy join us today. Anita is a founding member and executive director of IT for Change, where she leads research and advocacy on data and AI governance, platform regulation, and feminist frameworks on digital justice. She is a board member of global justice organizations and has also served as an expert in several international bodies, such as the United Nations CSTD's Working Group on Data Governance and the Paris Peace Forum's Working Group on Algorithmic Governance. So Anita will be in conversation with Paola Ricaurte, who helped found and leads the Latin American and Caribbean Feminist AI Network. Paola is a full professor at Tecnológico de Monterrey and a faculty associate at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University. Her work is grounded in a commitment to global justice and the critical examination of social technical systems, contributing to the development of feminist, decolonial, and community-centered AI technologies. So Paola, over to you and Anita.
Thank you very much, Isadora. Good morning. Well, good morning for me. Good afternoon or good night, or wherever you are. Thank you all for being here. We're super excited to be here today. And I would like to begin saying that around the world, we are seeing artificial intelligence enter every part of our social life, from policy and welfare systems to online safety and social media moderation. But we know that AI is neutral. It's built within structures that already carry deep gender, racialized, and colonial bias. So today, I'm thrilled to be in conversation with a dear colleague and friend, one of the most influential thinkers on technology and gender, Anita Gurumurthy. Anita, thank you for being here. We are super excited to be here with you. And I would like to begin, because I know we don't have a lot of time, I would like to begin asking you to share with us, with our audience, a little bit about the work that ITC for Change have been doing over the past 25 years, because you have been celebrating your 25th anniversary recently, and you were pioneers in the fight for digital and gender justice. So I would like to begin just for you to speak about the work that you do.
Thank you very much. It's overwhelming to be here and very, very humbling. All of you who I admire so much, and thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to say that the organization basically works to end injustices in relation to our shared digital coexistence. We work with feminist practices, we theorize, we engage with institutions, we challenge power structures from the local to global levels. And in doing all of this, we also work along with, learn from, and co-shape knowledge networks, naming what we are up against, making connections across issues, across very, very thick complexity. Our effort in the past 10 years has been specifically geared to systematically disrobe the grand assumptions of digital empire. So we've been connecting the dots between digital intelligence, the dividends that come out of intelligence. So intelligence dividends and power. And I think this is part of a long tradition of feminist endeavor. And it's a small contribution, I think, and an inspired contribution to this world of feminist practice and study.
Thank you very much. You are very humble. I would say that IT for Change has been a really an organization that has really transformed the way in which we understand digital justice in relation to gender. And my next question would be, how do you see the relationship between AI and the global fight against gender-based violence today?
If I may take a little bit of time to lay this out, I can speak from the research of my colleagues and I. We see this dominant AI paradigm about which I think all participants here today understand a great deal. One thing we all understand is that it's hugely unaccountable. It's based on the impunity of a few unfathomably rich patriarchs who have captured not only democratic process, but they have also captured social memory. And so when we see gender performativity in the space, there is a certain crisis of the self. And I would just like to dip into our research, which we did in 2017. You know, this is long before Instagram, but certainly after the mobile phone and after the social media revolution, the so-called social media revolution had consumed the imagination of young people. We went to colleges to interview young men and young women, and one of the young men we met said the following. And this is their idea of gender equality. So the person says, and I quote, "Take, for example, if I mock or make sarcastic jokes of my friend, if it is a boy, then it is okay. But the moment I tell it to a woman, people say that you're abusing her, you're dominating her. What is there to dominate in sarcasm? Anyone can be sarcastic, right? Women's empowerment means equality. Men and women should be equal. So if I make a non-vegetarian joke, which is basically in Indianism, it really means something that is loaded with abuse. If I make a non-vegetarian joke about my guy friend, it's okay. So if I make a non-vegetarian joke about a girl, that should be okay too. Otherwise, it's unfair, it's hypocritical." So this is what the young man said. And I would like to contrast this with what the young woman, one of the young women that we met said. So the female person is saying, "Men never mean to say anything of that sort, but they get very unnecessary memes sometimes, and we just laugh it off. We know what our personal opinions are about things, and I think they don't intend to say such things." Another young woman said, "They term me as a feminist, but the term feminist is so conflicting now. It just gives a negative notion because that's how people have made it now. The meaning of feminism is just equality and not putting men down." So what really strikes me in all of this is that there is a de-democratization. The entire project of feminism and the kind of gains that were made in the decades of the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, somehow I feel with just the stroke of capitalist social media technology was taken away. That's because in the virality of our online flows, sexualized femininity is naturalized as a commodity. And this is meant to be given on a platter to masculine subcultures, what we call homosocial spaces, and what today is known as the manosphere, right? So this kind of encouragement of homosociality, which is impregnable because you don't know what is coded into the cultures of this kind of manosphere, is actually very dangerous. And this leads to not just a crisis of self and society, but also of agency. What I'd like to point to is also, and sorry for taking a bit more time, I would really like to address the question of femicide. So allow me to just build. What I really wanted to say is that as social media platforms become a vital site for public communication and discourse, we actually see the space being weaponized by institutionalized patriarchies. And this is worrisome because it normalizes violence, but it also de-democratizes gender discourse. And the public, the idea of the public changes, it transmutates. The boundaries of discursive space, of civility, identity, political performance, gender performance, all of this really changes because of the algorithmic infrastructure that powers this kind of thinking. Therefore, as many people say, what we are confronted with in this algorithmified public space is that misogyny is not a bug, it is a feature. It's built in. So what I want to say is we studied very, very systematically 30,000 mentions on Twitter over the period of 2020 to 2022. And in those days, it was possible to get data through APIs from the backend of Twitter. As you all probably know, it's not possible to gather this data anymore, right? Because all these platforms have closed access to data. So when we scraped the data and coded it for the kinds of hate against public political figures, all of them women, we looked at the handles of 20 women in public political life. We found that trolling, which is a death by 1,000 cuts. So this is something we need to understand, that we're talking not only about a definitive moment called death, we're talking about trolling, which is a death by 1,000 cuts. We know that public political figures who are women simply withdraw because the chilling effect is so much. Light-hearted, abusive messages, herd aggression, intersectional violence against minority religious communities. All of this point to a crisis of publicness. And I want to say that it's recursive, the platform architectures and the public communicative registers. The registers that record abuse of speech feeds the algorithms, which then feeds these registers in that communicative rationality. And I would like to say that algo speech, which is the use of various kinds of subversive and subterranean code language is widely prevalent. We need to understand it better. And I want to end with a story of a young woman who was killed in India recently. And she was an influencer and she dared to, be a public figure on Instagram. And she was ticked off. She was warned several times and because she was gaining influence. And one day she was issued a death threat that if she parks her car, she would be murdered in the parking lot. And sure enough, she was murdered in the parking lot. After which, the term parking lot was used as a threat against all female influencers. So hashtag parking lot was a way to describe the way in which patriarchy would silence any other woman who dared to become an influencer. So I want to stop here because although I have given the example of social media, you're very right, Paola. We're talking about a deep-seated capitalist kind of patriarchal programming that extends to platforms in welfare, platforms that mediate health, platforms that mediate employment opportunities. And fundamentally, I think the story is one and the same. I'll stop here.
Well, you have really unpacked a lot of the layers of complexity that we are now facing, not only about the shrinking of the public space, but also how all these platforms align with social practices and the lack of action by governments, the lack of um, yeah of governments being like responsible also for what's happening, and it makes me think, now, like, we're facing all this shrinking of the public sphere, but also we have been witnessing like the development of different technologies that are even more powerful to exert violence against women. What are, in your vision, our possibilities? What are we missing? What do we need to do?
I think one of the things that we need to do is to first understand that visibility and voice are mobilized very selectively within digital capitalism, right? So, since the materialities of oppression, on the other hand, are not visible, it's extremely hard to build resistance. So, in every sense of the term, it is a game that is stacked from the get-go. So, you're really facing a situation where the oppressor is not visible and the oppressive system is extremely complex. I would like to really get a little bit into the idea of AI refusal, right? I mean, we've been talking in recent times about saying no. I mean, students have been saying no to technologies that assess them and evaluate them. Welfare recipients have been saying no to AI that judges whether they are deserving or not deserving. In our understanding to refuse AI, I think we really need to place it in a historical sense within feminist wisdom. In the year 1985, I remember reading this I didn't read it in 85, but in 1985, Dawn brought up this beautiful book, Development, Crisis, and Alternative Visions. And this book was written during the decade immediately after Beijing. This was about rejecting the poisoned pie. What the book said is third world women know what there is to be known about their livelihoods, about preserving nature, and about coexisting with ecology. If the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank steps into Africa and Latin America, and in the name of structural adjustment programs, unleashes a model of development, integrating into that is not the business of feminism. We really need to reject the poison pie. We don't need a share in the pie. So what I really want to say is that this idea of refusal needs to be taken into a certain vision and perspective of third world women, of the global South women, of women from the global majority countries, because arguing against a particular modality, a particular efficiency of global AI capital is not just about delinking and becoming isolated. It is about breaking structural subordination, right? It is about rejecting certain theories of historical colonial extraction. We need to point to something that has already been identified long ago. So it's not the poor, but it's the systematically impoverished. So it's very important to refer to ourselves not as the oppressed, but as people that have been made to be impoverished. And certainly, I think, there are scholars who've theorized this, that we need to confront this idea of degrowth. And this is without confronting imperial metabolism, we will just be talking about austerity for the third world. So we have to confront the connections between empire, extractivism, and the way in which AI is constructed. And therefore, ideas of refusal, ideas of global delinking must dismantle extractive contracts cancel odious debts, look at technological autonomy, and end the military-industrial complex. And this is what I think the Palestinian movement, the pro-Palestinian movement is telling us. And I'd really like to pause here because the idea, I think, of refusal is situated in a larger feminist idea of historicized rejections of the kind of development epistemology that has been thrust on us.
Thank you, Anita. It's fantastic. And I remember when we were at the celebration meeting of IT for Change, when James spoke about precarity as a political project. And I think that precarity and violence are both political projects that are today aligned with the technological project that we are now like confronting, which is the hegemonic AI that is part of the same poison pie. And I would like to maybe like to begin like closing our conversation and open the space for questions. Looking ahead, what gives you hope about feminist movements, and also what kinds of collaborations between feminist movements and technologies hold the most promise for transformative change?
I think there are two things we can take away from feminism. And the first thing is really, in the current order, we talk about responsible AI, we talk about ethical AI. And I think this particular capitalist order, even if you make AI responsible, would only correct the symptoms without altering the ontology of value, right? So like scholars have put it, Indy Johar, for instance, says that the wealth system is not just an economic order, it's an epistemic enclosure. It defines what can be seen, measured, and valued, and in doing so, it defines what can be ignored, externalized, and destroyed. I think feminism systematically unpacks the relationship between ideology and materiality. And no other lens can do it as well as feminist thought. Just think about it. The earliest insights about the public and private is about the way frames define value in the world. And quite beautifully and conversely, material architectures affect what is admissible value, right? And I think that the real question, therefore, is how are we then defining the creation of the conditions for life that are made visible through different perspectives of value? The second idea that feminism brings to the table, and therefore feminist thought is extremely important, and I think that other scholars looking at algorithmic justice have also pointed this out, is the idea of the right to truth. And to make truth a constitutional value. And I think that constitutions, for instance, in the context of India, define equality, liberty, and in the context of the very, very fraught historical circumstance which produced the country, also fraternity, which is brotherhood, sisterhood. I think that the idea of truth has to be restored because feminists have always complicated truth. We've never taken truth at face value. We've complicated it always. And I think that this is what even Hannah Arendt says, right? I mean, she talks about insisting on factual truth can perform a vital and risky political act. And the truth teller is extremely important. Who is telling the truth is important. Otherwise, she says, we will suffer a complete loss of reality. And this idea of publicness and the idea of truth, I think, have to be integrated. Feminists really have to go back to the drawing board and we have to unpack what public and publicness is all about. And this is really about a civilizational cycle. At certain moments, we have to unpack privacy. At other moments, we have to unpack publicity, publicness. I think we're sitting at a moment in history when we have to connect publicness and truth, because that is the project, I think, that faces us in a very contextual way. And here is where computational scientists, technologists, people thinking about language, people thinking about civic life, people thinking about participation, the labor movements, can really hold the space for complexity, reciprocity, and care becoming economic materialities in the way in which we imagine our futures. So I will stop there. It's time to trouble the public.
I think, yeah, and it's time to trouble the public. And also, I think that you remind me when you speak about the ontological and the epistemological dimensions of our fight. That also, when we speak about AI, we are also speaking about these regimes of truth and epistemic regimes that are being imposed against us. So I really love this idea of rethinking our own, like, fight, um, considering also those dimensions. And here, well, I don't know if we should begin with the questions and answers, because we have already a lot of comments. But before that, um, I don't know if you would like to give a closing idea before we open the floor for questions, because we have a lot, and I would like for you to take them.
I just wanted to say that we talk a lot about transparency, accountability, tweaking the system. And of course, I think in my own country this month we have the national AI guidelines. I know that other countries like Brazil are also looking at AI regulation. Unless we change the foundations of the way in which governance and democracy can connect with the process of production of knowledge and the process of legitimizing alternative knowledges, I think we are going to really face a very tough future. And this is really about posterity and intergenerational rights. It is really about narrative power. And I do think that while it all seems like a social science analysis, I think it is also about redefining and reshaping institutions. I think the way in which democratic processes are understood and designed has to really change. And therefore, I would really like to submit that what we are talking about is the very redesign of our polities, the way in which our political institutional frameworks can change and our constitutional frameworks can measure up.
Thanks so much, Anita. And when you, I totally agree, because when sometimes we think that our struggles are only related, for example, like to the everyday lives and to our everyday experiences. But I think that because we are seeing today this threat to, as you said, to everything that's considered the public or the commons, then we also need to have that in mind, because we are witnessing now this urgency to think beyond, to think for the future as well. Everything that is being threatened and everything that is being now erased or considered not valid, as you were mentioning at the beginning. Being today a feminist is like being a non-desirable person in the world. But it also has to do with this reconfiguration of the values of society. So I thank you for your your ideas and the experiences that you have been sharing with us. And we have a lot of questions. So I would like to, because some of them are in Spanish, so I'm going to read first those that are in English. And well, the first one is okay. I have to translate it.
Paola, do you
Um,
want some help? We've translated the questions already in a document. Do you want me to help give the questions from the chat?
okay, yeah. Okay, thank you, because yeah, we have
Yeah, we were
different
trying to
questions.
collect them all. They were coming in fast and furious while you all were talking, and then in different languages.
Oh,
So yeah, so
okay,
maybe
thank you so much.
I'll surface the first one, and I think we would love to hear from really both of you on these questions. So the first one is, how can we, as countries in the global south, take action against large AI corporations to ensure that their security policies are more responsive to our needs, given that they only respond to the cultures and needs of societies in the global north? This represents a major cultural and language barrier, particularly for women, in managing cases of digital violence on these platforms. What strategies do you think could address these power imbalances?
I think it's a question that will require us to get together
Yes,
and have a
Anita,
conversation.
yeah, I will put it here again in the
Yes.
chat so that
Okay.
we can have it handy.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. I think that the fact that we are all users and we're all managed very carefully to remain users is really a deep diabolical political conspiracy, right? I think to that extent, it's extremely hard to find these isolated solutions. The opportunity, I think, arises in the way in which movements are able to articulate their concerns. So I would say that the ecological justice movement, the labor justice movement, and several other movements, I think, that can come together to address the structural questions of the paradigm alone will bring the big tech corporation to its knees. And I think I'm saying something that's very obvious. I think that's part of all our consciousness. But I also want to state an important point here that um, the solidarities we build are very, very delicate. And today I find that there is a process of desolidarization, like the labor movement in India. For instance, gig workers have come up to do a lot, but the way in which female gig workers or women gig workers on digital labor platforms are finding it extremely hard to organize, with their time and space very, very squeezed through a surveillance economy and the apathy of the state presents extraordinary difficulties. So the hope for the global south is really in the leadership of some countries. I think there has to be some kind of political solution. I'm certainly not negating the need for grassroots activism and solidarities, but considering that solidarities are at a moment when they have been rendered so fragile, we do really need very strong political leadership from our leaders. And therefore, one of the ways in which the networks I'm part of works is to really identify allies. And often, because we don't have an idealized world, I cite the BRICS AI Declaration as a very important document. It might not be the most inspiring document. It's certainly not a feminist charter on AI, but it's certainly a beginning that challenges other ways to think of AI governance.
Thank you, Anita. And I'm glad that you mentioned the BRICS because, in at least in Latin America, especially in Brazil, there is a huge conversation around the BRICS being a way to put some limits to corporate power. Uh, and as you said, maybe it's not um, the solution or the solution that we would like to see, at least being feminist, but the idea of having counterpowers to the big corporate U.S. power in particular, it's clear, at least I mean, for many people, even for Europe, right? they are trying to um, they are trying to do something, but even for Europe, it's complicated. I think that we have more questions, and Catherine is having more clarity on that.
Yeah, they keep coming. So yeah, another question here that connects, I think, to some of the things you all were talking about in regards to public space and to governance. So the question is, how can we redesign technological policies when democracy in the Southern Hemisphere is under threat from the advance of right-wing and fascist policies? And I will just add that right-wing and fascist policies are also on the rise in the Northern Hemisphere as well. So, I mean, it's almost like a very transnational and global phenomenon. So how do we think about governance when our democratic and governing institutions are increasingly failing us, I guess?
I mean, again, I would really appreciate views from everybody. So I'm also reading the chat to know what you're all thinking. I think this is a moment when we have to think about international solidarity all over again. I think this is not the first time it has been thought about. And I do remember that reading about and understanding, the non-aligned movement, the fact that UNESCO was a very, very important site where many countries really got together to resist a hegemonic, northern kind of narrative. So what does that non-alignment look like, and what does it mean for progressive, principled feminist civil society to actually work with political leaders, and how do we actually bring about that international solidarity? I think it's extremely important. It's also possible, I think, because we've reached a point of we're at the precipice. It can't get any worse. So I also feel that there are many, many invisible movements, and I am fortunate to be a mother. And of course, I only feel that not to overvalorize motherhood, but because I have an opportunity to learn from my daughters. And I feel that the students' movement in India is a really beacon of hope. I think it's a very hard time for students to be politically articulate, to express themselves. And you're right, Catherine, it's true, I think, for campuses in so many different countries that were once upon a time celebrated as the bastion of free speech, right? So I think that despite all of this, children, young people, just come up and express themselves to just restore democracy in a very, very strange way. We used to think in feminist thought of our foremothers handing over the baton. And I sometimes think I'm receiving the baton from younger people. And I think that's a huge privilege. And I know that this seems to be romanticizing resistance, but I don't mean to reduce it to that. I do feel that because we are condemned to hope, we really need to claim all of this.
Thank you, Anita, so much. And I will also echo Elena's comment on our need to work on different fronts. Like,
Yeah.
we need to take every front. I mean, feminist movements, students movements, workers movements, ecological movements, and I agree with you. I do hope, I really hope that we can continue building this transnational solidarity. I mean, this event is an example of this conversation going, from different parts of the world, having people from different parts of the world. And I think that that is a really good example of how we should continue um, working together and learning from each other as well.
So I think we have time for maybe one more question. And I might use my moderator privilege to ask my question because I really want to hear what you all have to say about it. So I want to come back. I think Anita mentioned like this this kind of framing of responsible AI and the BRIC document. And I feel like we are just seeing so many different kind of frames for how do we talk about AI. So it's like responsible AI, ethical AI. This event, we're seeing feminist AI. In industry, you know, the framing is increasingly around safety. So like AI safety. And so I guess how do you all think about these different frames, and how do we respond kind of like as feminists, as people who care about studying and challenging the differential power, because so many of these frames kind of like ignore the power relationship. So that frame of like AI safety is completely ignoring the kind of whole organization of economic and corporate infrastructure around AI and the data centers and so on and so forth. So what do you all feel like are the most promising kind of frames, conceptual frames for how do we think about AI? What should we be kind of using and what should we be rejecting?
I'd like to hear from you, Paola.
Well, well, that's a tough question, of course, but going back to this comment on like thinking of the different fronts, I also think that we need to take, if we want to have frameworks that are useful for us, we also need to learn from different frameworks and experiences. From really inspires me is knowledge production of indigenous women leaders in Latin America, and for me it's a source of inspiration because indigenous struggles for me are a reminder of the long lasting struggles of our territories, and also a space for hope, because despite everything and despite all the systems of violence that are, trying very hard to exterminate us, people are resisting and are resisting everywhere. So every framework or every experience that gives you like an idea of how to move forward and how to learn also from previous experiences, for me is useful. So I don't have like, you can like a specific idea of you have to use that, or you no, it's, I think it's even something personal in terms of what makes sense for you in your own struggle and the struggle of your community.
Thanks so much. I do agree with that, and I think my only reflection on that is I think it's like vocabularies and language tend to get co-opted. They tend to multiply with different interest groups. So when someone is saying empowerment, then you have to look at who is saying empowerment and of whom. So I do agree that these standpoints present a very, very complex terrain of oftentimes superficially shared vocabulary without necessarily grounding them in shared principles. So that itself, I think, Catherine, is extremely important. And which is why I do really love the post-colonial and feminist ideas of continuously evolving jurisprudence, right? I mean, in India, we're very proud of the fact that our constitution is a living document. So you never interpret liberty in one way. As time travels, as society travels, we had a landmark judgment a decade ago on the right to education. And the right to education was affirmed as and was read through the right to life. Can you imagine? The constitutional value of the right to life was used to interpret the right to education. That is, there's absolutely no point in your being alive if you cannot have the right to education. So it's very profound, I think, this ideas of allowing for principles and values to be open and to interpret them through contestation. I think that's important, whether it's safe AI or responsible AI or whatever.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that answer around, like kind of thinking about it as more of a process or a practice rather than landing on one specific frame that we should all be behind or something. I think that's it offers a way forward, which is wonderful. So I want to maybe just take a moment and we can appreciate our amazing speakers. So if everyone wants to give some reactions, you can put some hearts or claps or rocket ships or whatever you might have at your disposal for emojis. So yeah, thank you so much, Anita and Paola, for sharing your wisdom today. It's a wonderful start to this conversation, and already has given me so much hope. So we're gonna go from here. We're gonna take just a 2-minute break so people can have just a screen break, bio break, get some coffee or tea or whatever, and then we're gonna be coming back, and we have 3 really amazing short talks about feminist AI projects to share with you. And I think, again, that you'll find these grounded examples really, really exciting and forward-looking. So, yeah, thank you.
We'll be back in 3 minutes or so. Yeah, wonderful.
Hello, hello. I think we are coming back. Hope you are feeling better and relaxed and energized after that really great conversation that we just listened with Paola and Anita. We are really grateful of having that conversation. I'm Silvana Fumega. I'm one of the co-founders of Data Against Feminicide. And I'm really happy to be in this part of this session that we co-organize with the Latin American Feminist AI Network to introduce key initiatives at the intersection of AI, inclusion, and gender-based violence. We are going to hearing from 3 projects related to the topic. Each of them will talk for about 10 minutes and they will be presenting their ideas and insights. And we're going to have a couple of minutes for some pressing questions. Please, if you have any question about the projects that you are going to be listening about, put that in the chat and we are going to try to cover as much as possible. So in that sense, I'd like to start presenting the 3 projects that we are going to be hearing from. We have Sophia, the project Sophia, we have Paty Peña, and she's going to be talking to us about how feminist grounded chatbots are tackling online gender-based violence. We also have the other project that is Feminicide Narratives AI, and it's going to be based on how media annotation, AI, and feminist design come together for better coverage on gender-based violence. And lastly, we are going to listen from the Data Laborers Association and how organizing data labor is essential, as it was mentioned in the previous conversation, for ethical AI systems and futures. So first of all, we are going to be listening from Paty. Again, remember to go through the different channels for the language that you prefer to listen to each of our panelists. We are going to be having first, as I was saying, the pleasure to listen about the Sophia initiative from Paty Peña. That's a project that she was working with the team at Fundación Datos Protegidos and the Observatorio de Estadísticas de Género e Interseccionalidades in Chile, and it was supported also by the Latin American Caribbean Feminist AI Network. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to give the floor to Paty, and I'm really grateful that you are here to let us know about the project. And Paty, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today, especially after hearing Anita and Paola, because it's really giving us hope and courage, and I think I can present now. Okay. I am going to present this work, which is a chatbot. I'm going to show you how it works too. It's Sofia. I'm going to present in Spanish. I hope the interpretation is going fine. SOF+IA is a chatbot, a conversational AI, a small conversational AI, feminist in the context of Chile. And we began developing this because there was something that was not as evident or as complex in Chile as it is now. This was 8 or 9 years ago. The name means, translates as system of feminist listening or hearing. And what is the mission of this system? Well, the idea is to tackle, in our context, in the global south, in Chile, how could we, in a way, tackle something that was becoming increasingly evident and stronger in different aspects of in the life of women who participate in public life, democratic life, as we said, and social media platforms. And then a key issue that was making this visible through data, telling this, now using it as inspiration, because saying this data of violence, of situations of digital violence is very complex, and it's usually associated to surveys. So, well, first is the context. In Chile, the best visibility that comes related to situations of harassment or abuse, this at first comes precisely with the student movement, the feminist student movement in May 2018. Then there's this social uprising in Chile. There was this moment where all different sectors, and in particular women, took to the streets in protest, making demands over a series of situations. That was another key moment. And these two moments were the context for making this issue of violence and harassment gaining visibility. It becomes more public. The media starts talking about this. And then at that time in Chile, we didn't have civil organizations in civil society or networks of women that would know how to deal with this. So there were some organizations that were developing some kind of research. And at the time we said, okay, how can we support this in Chile, as in many other places in the world? There's big talk about the use of generative AI as a technology that is normally being used with the creation of a series of situation creating images and so on and so forth. So Sophia, in a way, was a project that took all this time, then during the pandemic, and then during the following period of discussion of the constitution reform in Chile that made very clear the situation about political violence against women who are holding public space. And like in many other countries in the world, we didn't have statistical data. There was no institutional response. This was the first ideas about having a bill, about a law that would punish this kind of violence. It's still under discussion. It does not have a gender-based perspective. So it was a key thing for us to deal with statistics. So this is the context where the feminist network appears. The Paola coordinates this network, the Feminist Network for Artificial Intelligence in Latin America and the Caribbean, seeking to create projects that would challenge or question AI from our south for this kind of situation. So you may be thinking, and we've been thinking about this too, you could be saying, well, by using artificial intelligence to create a feminist response against it, how is that possible? Well, it was a process. At the moment, Sophia is available as a chatbot, conversational AI, operating over a platform, a web. We made this decision so that it could be recorded as anonymously as possible. Up until very recently, it was still a prototype because we're still making improvements and several things that I will share with you later. But thanks to the funding that we got, our focus was even a stronger focus on the development. This is not a chatbot thought for all sorts of experiences of women in Chile. It's very specifically considered to be a resource, a support for some women who are experiencing this kind of violence and who are part of these world of activist women, journalists, women in media. Because in a way, in this process, we also learned that we need locations like specificity. And this was part of what we tried to learn in this process. This system of feminist listening or hearing does not just get information, but also at the end of the interaction, when you report a situation that happened to you, it will deliver a report, which in a way is like a first step, so that whoever is interacting will have a record of what happened. Why? Because many times in these kind of situations, women don't know how to file this. They don't know that they need evidence. There are many things that we don't know. And so we've been learning about that too. That was part of the learning process, of the research process. This is a summary of the process that I summarized in 4 key stages, but this is still an ongoing learning process. So in this development, there are also different types of knowledges that come into play. Of course, this is a technological project, but it's also an essentially feminist and a social project. And about data visualization, we have Daniela Mojano here. She's a co-coordinator of this project, and she's the one who's helped us, who turned this into a reality, what it implies to talk about data feminism, why this was so important to make visible all these data gathered by the chat. The principles, as I mentioned, had to do with issues that were applied from the methodology of building with other women that had experienced these kind of situations, from different movements, different networks, different groups in Latin America, Chile, particularly in Chile. I want to mention, for example, women who were fighting for the right to abortion, the network of feminist reporters, journalists, another network of researchers that is working now. And during all this time, all this space, they have been, in a way, the ones who have given us the ideas of how this must be evolving. Now, during the process, the incubation of the process, I would say that it was a unique experience that allowed us to go from a paper, just an applied research, and then being able to turn that research in a pilot program, and then having that pilot program become a prototype. And that is very interesting because it was an experience promoted by this network. We've been discussing this with Paola. And this allows you to get closer to other kind of things, what we call in academia research and action, like research and development. And so indeed, all the projects, I will mention others from my colleagues later, but this research allowed us to systematize information. We knew there were other chatbots in other places in the world. We contacted a project in India. We shared many things in common with that group too. And that process of comparing what could work in Chile, in our context, in our situation, with our dynamics. And then after we developed the pilot, that was also a moment when we went from one way of designing chatbots, which was perhaps a bit less professional, more amateur. Now we can use different APIs with different texts. Now we do have generative AIs existing, but the decisions of that technological infrastructure is also key. Now this process, this prototype is still for us an asset that is currently in development. It's a learning process that is still ongoing. In fact, for example, the entire panel visualizing data that I will show you later is being redesigned now because we are making many adjustments to many variables. I'm explaining something that you can see there. It's very small. It looks very small there, this canvas. This was another learning process for this project, which is to have a methodology that would allow us to understand what the journey was like, what the process was like, designing the user experience, the journey map of a user, of a woman that experiences a situation of violence or digital harassment at some point in her life. And that also allowed us to understand the extent to which, I mean, how much could we interact, and what kind of interaction that person would have, what kind of information, what kind of response, what kind of knowledge could it deliver, and how that would also help us making contributions in a way. Everything relating to the user experience of the woman that will use it. In Spanish, when we say user, if we don't make a specific note, we talk to a man, the user is male. So we say people that use, so women users, something that we have to do in Spanish. And so what is it? I also mentioned how we've been adding these feminist principles in the development. Project is always thinking about projects that have to do with how to guarantee anonymity, data protection. That's why SOF+IA is not an app. It doesn't ask for your real name. We are now working on a system to see how we can offer continuity and follow-ups on a case-by-case basis. Another important thing is that SOF+IA doesn't have, it's not very public yet because it's being tested in organized groups of women where women themselves are training it so that we can generate, mediation. So it's also not conceived as a 100% public chat, but we don't know. It's not a decision that we have made yet because we are really concerned with seeing it as a support tool to create a community. Here we still need to connect, support networks, other women, other organizations that are also working in emotional support, understanding that digital violence is like any other form of gender-based violence. And that's why it's so hard to talk just about regulation without having an institutional discussion that includes all these aspects. I want to highlight in this last part how we can think about the development of these technologies when you have this vision, because there are many disciplines at the same time. It's not just making tech decisions, it's focusing on the decisions and the design that center people, and in this case, women. It's not the same. We have a woman that's a journalist or an academic, or a woman that is an activist in a territory, or a woman that works in a city, in an urban community, or in a rural community, or in a native community. Those are different issues that came up recently for these projects. And that is one recommendation that we took. And then the other thing is, what do we do with the narrative of those data? That's also a process that involves a lot of learning. There's a prototype here you can access and follow that link, sofiachat.cl. It's in Spanish. Wow. It's in Chilean Spanish. That's also another challenge for our project, how to, in these interactions, understanding the way people speak here. SOF+IA always begins with greeting, saying she's there to support, getting reports about digital violence, offering help on social media. In Chile, this is usually in social media. But then there's the next stage where the AI interacts with you. Then you can identify the situation you are experiencing. We are working now so it doesn't look so much like a form, so that it is more similar to a conversation that many youngsters and young women have in other chats. And then finally, we're also considering looking for resources, multimedia resources like videos, tutorials, because that's also part of of the project. I suppose we'll discuss it later, which is funding is also a key part of this project. So in this conversation, you have at the beginning, this is narrowed down to just a few situations. It needs more training to be able to provide guidance on other issues. For example, what is a deep fake? Or what are other kinds of digital violence or digital abuse? Because that's also been very important. What we identify at the moment, the labels that we use now, the tags that we use to say, okay, this is digital violence, these are changing all the time. And then the final part is what the logic, what the data visualization logic is, the dashboard, where we visualize the kind of situations that happened, how frequent they were, if they were private or public events, if they are identified, if we have identified the perpetrator profile. This would also be useful to generate other actions later. So that's all. I can stop here now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paty. I think it was an incredible presentation, and I think it speaks to the importance of networks, different kind of networks to develop, to research, to support this type of projects that are so important to all of us. And talking about networks, I mean, and the importance of associations, we're going to turn to the Data Labelers Association, led by Joan Kinyua and Ephantus Kanyugi. Hopefully I'm saying the names right, but probably not. And they are the association that was founded with a mission to advocate for the rights, recognition, and well-being of data labelers. I mean, as we already was discussed in the presentation that we have with Anita and Paola. So I'm gonna give the floor to Joan to start the conversation, and also Ephantus to tell us about the work that they are doing and the importance of the work that they are doing. So Joan, Ephantus, the floor is yours. 10 minutes, please.
Hello everyone. I'm Joan Kinyua, and I'm the president of the Data Labelers Association. We are 11 months in since we launched last year in the month of December. So our role, or the part we are playing in this space, is to educate the mass on how important our role is, how like the data labelers are the most integral part of the data labeling of the AI field and the AI sphere. So from conversations that we have been having before, we seem to hear that AI, ethical practices in the AI, but nowadays I choose to speak about like responsible practices in the artificial intelligence field, because AI is purely built on people's blood and sweat, and like very irresponsible practices by the big tech organizations. So from this conversation, I'm going to take the conversation to Ephantus so he can take us through the presentations that we created for the people to sort of understand our role in this space.
Thank you so much. Ephantus, you are on mute.
Yes. So, hello
Perfect.
everyone. Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes.
Okay. So, my name is Ephantus Kanyugi. I'm the Vice President and the Operations Lead for the Data Labelers Association. Yeah, and I'll be the one taking you through the slides. So, over the last few sessions, we've had some incredible insights about AI, but I'd like us to look at it from a different perspective. What does AI look like from the perspective of the people who power it? We have the data labelers, we have the annotators, we have the content moderators, basically the humans behind the algorithms. Then how do they experience AI? What challenges they face, and how can we build an AI ecosystem that is not only ethical but also fair, inclusive, and caring? And that's what I'll be sharing with you today. So what is data labeling? So data labeling is the invisible foundation of artificial intelligence. It's the process of teaching machines what to see, what to read, and how to understand the world. So it can be one image, it can be one word, and it can be one click at a time. And behind every AI model you've heard about, from medical diagnostics to self-driving cars, there's a global network of people, often in the global south, performing this work with precision and care. Many of them are young people in Africa. There are many young people in Asia and Latin America. Many are women balancing digital work with family responsibilities, and all of them are essential to how AI learns. Global frameworks like the EU AI Act, the EU White Paper on AI, and UNESCO's work on AI ethics talk about human-centered AI, but we believe human-centered must also mean worker-centered, because AI is only as ethical as the conditions of the people who build it. What is content moderation? So if labeling is teaching AI how to see, then content moderation is how people protect the rest of us from what AI and human produces. The role of a content moderator is where they act as a gatekeeper. Essentially, when people upload content, there's no restriction to what people can upload, but then there's a filter to what actually gets to the viewer on these platforms. And so the harmful content, as a disclaimer, such as people taking their own life, people being unalived. For example, we are talking about GBV, and all that is uploaded. But then the content moderators are the people who look at this content and flag it as inappropriate for human consumption. So you can imagine spending hours a day just viewing this disturbing or graphic content with little or no mental health support. That's the reality of many moderators in Kenya, the Philippines, and other parts of the global south. And yet, this work is rarely acknowledged. So these workers carry the emotional burden of keeping the internet safe, but remain invisible in conversations about digital rights and AI ethics. Even UNESCO's recommendations on the ethics of AI have begun to recognize this, and that ethical AI must also protect the people whose labor sustains it. Now let's look at the challenges faced by data labelers and moderators, the realities behind AI's progress. The first one is exploitation in AI work, where we find that a lot of people are experiencing low pay. So many workers, practically like in Kenya, a lot of workers are actually paid $1 an hour, in comparison to counterparts working in the exact same work in other regions, such as the US, where someone is actually paid at $60 per hour for the exact same job. And even while working for these companies, yet they are making billions of dollars. They build systems that transform industries, yet they struggle. The workers actually struggle to meet their basic needs. Workers have unstable and isolated work. Most work under no contract. They actually term most of the workers as independent contractors. So what that means is you're only paid for the number of hours that you worked, but then you are not entitled to any benefits. So you don't get insurance, you don't get pensions. You basically just show up to work, get paid $1 an hour, and then once that is done, then your relationship with the company is done. Therefore, there's also no job security. So a worker can go to bed with work and wake up with none, simply because an algorithm reassigned their task. And this often leads to they often work alone. They also work without colleagues or recognition. Another issue is mental health, where some labelers, depending on the projects that they are working on, and moderators face trauma from daily exposure to violence and abuse online. Many experience depression and anxiety, but very few can access mental health support because, one, they cannot afford it, and then two, it's also not provided by the company. And then importantly, gender also adds another layer, where you find that women in this workforce often carry double burdens, emotional labor in their jobs and care labor at home. So this is why fairness in AI must include gender justice, and it shouldn't be a separate issue, but it should be as part of the broader demand for dignity at work. This is the hidden human cost of artificial intelligence, and it's the side of innovation that we rarely talk about. So introducing the Data Labelers Association. So the Data Labelers Association was founded in 2024 to address exactly these realities. So we are the first registered worker-led organization in Kenya, advocating for AI workers, so the data labelers, content moderators, and digital annotators. And our mission is to make the people behind AI visible, valued, and protected. We speak not just about fair pay, but about recognition, representation, and care. And when global bodies like the EU and UNESCO design AI policy, we want worker voices at the table because we are the ones shaping AI from the ground, and because we know that ethical AI begins with ethical work. Our programs and strategic goals. So at the DLA, Data Labelers Association in short is the DLA. So we work across several areas that connect directly to fairness and inclusion. So we focus on worker education and upskilling, where we try to educate people. We actually tell a story where we came together actually in 2023. There's 10 members, and we came together to do a research. We were part of a research program. And as we are giving our stories, we would, for example, say that an AI company asked people to provide, for example, videos and images of children between the age of 0 and 12 years old doing cartwheels, being changed diapers, and all that, and some other gruesome things. But according to me, as I was giving this story, I was just talking about how they, for example, I provided 15 images, they're supposed to pay me $10, but then they did not pay me for that work. But then as that conversation is going on, then someone, voices and says that, hey, that is actually a violation of children's right, but I did not know. So there's actually an issue with the work that people are being asked to do. There's an issue with the kind of contracts that they are being given. And then there's also an issue with also things like pay, but because people do not understand that this is a violation of their rights, you find that people put up with all these injustices that are happening. So one of the main things that we're trying to do is we're trying to do worker education, where we're trying to educate them on their legal rights. We're trying to educate them on the right way to address issues with the companies, and then also to be able to put pressure. So as policymakers are putting pressure on police, like the government is putting pressure on the tech companies, we can also have pressure from the workers in order to provide, equitable working conditions. We're also doing upskilling where, for example, you'll find that a lot of workers have been working in the space, but the tech companies never really invest in upskilling. But you find, like, for example, for data annotator, most of the work that they do is part of the process of something like data analysis, for example. So we just kind of upskill them so that people can be able to broaden their horizons. We also engage in policy advocacy, where we partner with others to ensure AI regulations that include labor rights and care standards. We've actually been in conferences with large organizations such as the ILO, but then as they are discussing the issues and how to address them, you find that they do not know about the human aspect or the human labor aspect of this equation, and therefore they're talking about taxation, how to make it standardized, how to, for example, regulate the space. But then there's no human aspect involved in that conversation. That's where we come about and we try to give these stories, we try to educate them on the challenges that the workers are actually doing, so that as they are creating regulations to regulate the AI spaces, that they can do so with workers also in mind, so that they can create regulations that do protect the rights of workers. Another project we do, we are also offering mental health and wellness programs. A lot of the workers, based off of the type of work that they are working on, and then also the nature of work, where you find you're only paid $1 an hour, so you find that the pay is not enough, but then you're forced to work 2 jobs in order to meet your basic needs, but then there's no growth in the space. And then you also, because of the nature of contracts, for example, you can't get access to things like loans. So you find that there's a lot of mental pressure and a lot of, mental unwellness with people experiencing anxiety, depression. For people who work on very graphic projects, you find that they're suffering from things like PTSD. But then the tech companies are not investing in psychiatric help. And therefore, us as the association, we are putting up programs where we can either pay or partner with experts, then offer that service for free to the workers. We've also built a community where we are trying to create a safe space online and offline where AI workers can share their experiences and learn from one another. So each of these programs is grounded in the same idea, where we talk about technology that should serve humanity and not exploit it. And the humans who power technology deserve dignity, and they also deserve care. What makes us different? DLA is unique in that it is led by the workers themselves. I have worked in the space for about 6 years. I believe Joan has actually worked there longer, maybe about 8 years. Therefore, as we are speaking for others, we are speaking from a perspective of knowledge, the perspective of experiencing these things, and that gives us authenticity and a clear sense of purpose. It's also what connects our mission to the feminist values, which is inclusion, care, and voice. So feminism reminds us that systems are not neutral, they reflect power, and AI too reflects power. Whose data is used, whose labor is valued, whose voice is heard. Our work is about rebalancing that power from the bottom up. Research and data initiatives. So to advocate effectively, we need evidence and we are collecting it ourselves. So through our workforce mapping project, we document how AI workers live and work, what challenges they face and what support they need. A good example would be, we actually were in an interview with someone who wanted to join with us. And as we are having a conversation, despite, for example, me working in the space for 6 years, we had a conversation with this person and he went ahead and mentioned 12 data labeling companies he's worked for that I've never heard of. So we kind of got to understand that this space is so broad that you might not understand it. Despite having lived through the experiences, we have so many people working in this space, working for different companies, going through different experiences, and that's why we chose to do, for example, a mapping exercise where we interview with people, we talk to people, and we kind of try to understand like what are the kind of issues that these people are going through, and then trying to put reports together, and also trying to come up with solutions that actually are useful to the workers. So we produce reports and help research grounded in lived experiences, complementing global efforts like those led by the EU and UNESCO, but from the workers' perspective. So this is crucial because without visibility, there can be no justice. We cannot talk about ethical AI if we don't even know who's building it. We've also
Thank
done...
you so much, Ephantus. If we can start closing, just to have some time for the other project, please.
Okay, I'm almost done. So what we are currently working on is the code of conduct. So it's based on 4 principles: integrity, respect, responsibility, and care. And we came up with it based off of the biggest challenges that the workers are facing, and then try to come up with solutions that are equitable for both the workers and the tech companies. So for example, when you talk about fair pay, the only reason the tech companies are coming from the US to the global south or the Philippines or other countries is because they are looking for cheap labor. So what is an amount that is equitable or fair for a worker, but it still counts as cheap labor for tech company, sort of a way to kind of phrase it. So in conclusion, why this matters? This matters because AI is not self-made, it is human-made. The people who train, test, and moderate AI systems make it possible for technology to work safely and effectively, but too often they remain unseen. So as we design policies, as we fund programs and regulate AI, we need to include the workers, both men and women, whose labor powers this revolution. We need systems that reward fairness, recognize care, and protect dignity. So if we can build machines that learn, we can also build systems that care. And that's what a feminist approach to AI looks like, one that values people as much as progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ephantus and Joan, not only for this presentation, but for the work that you are doing is really, really important. Chat for the participants. Remember, if you have any particular question, put it in the chat and we try to cover them in the last few minutes. But first of all, I want to finish this session presenting the project Feminicide Narratives and AI, a collaboration between Data Against Feminicide and the Discollab at Brown University. And Yujia and Harini are going to be talking to us about how media coverage of feminicide and gender-based violence can be analyzed, annotated, and reshaped via AI and participatory methods. So Yujia, Harini, the floor is yours to tell us about all the work that you are doing. Please.
Thank you. All right, it's great to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Harini. I'm an assistant professor at Brown University. And this is a collaboration between the lab that I run at Brown called the DISCO Lab, or Data and Society Collective, which Yujia is also a member, and the Data Against Feminicide Initiative. So the key challenge that we're focused on in this project is that of biases in media coverage about feminicides. So as we've learned through the Data Against Feminicide project, which many of you may be familiar with, media coverage is a really important source of information for activist data production. So nearly all of the activists and groups that the project has engaged with rely on news media in some way for their monitoring. However, one of the persistent challenges they encounter is that media coverage across contexts can be very harmful. It can blame victims, obscure structural causes of feminicide, reinforce discrimination, and ultimately contribute to state negligence and public inaction. At the same time, we believe the media could play a really important role in public communication about the problem and in supporting struggles for justice and greater public accountability around feminicide cases. So this is the space that we wanted to intervene in with this project. And drawing from our experiences with participatory technology design from the Data Against Feminicide project, we posed this following question: how might collaborative news annotation and artificial intelligence tools support more responsible feminist reporting of cases of gender-related violence? And more specifically, we have the following aims. So our first aim is to co-develop a taxonomy of both harmful and constructive journalistic practices that are sensitive to how feminicides are framed in the news across language and regions. And then our other aim is to experiment with collective and collaborative data annotation in contrast with conventional and extractive processes for creating data sets. And then finally, we also were interested in ideating around AI, so collectively brainstorming possible systems while also exploring whether AI tools are viable or desirable in this domain. So through engaging with data collection and AI, we also have this parallel motivation for our project, which is to critically engage with the problem of data annotation work in the current AI development landscape. So we've already heard from that great presentation from the Data Labelers Association about the default conditions of this work. And as they described, data annotation work is typically underpaid, invisible, it can be isolating and emotionally laborious. And much of this work is outsourced to low-paid and marginalized workers in the global South, reproducing extractive colonial dynamics. At the same time, despite their indispensable role in data production, annotators generally have very little control or influence over the annotation process or how that data is used in downstream systems. And ultimately, annotators are viewed as interchangeable units of labor rather than a core part of how meaning and value are constructed and embedded into AI systems. As people with important expertise and lived experience. So for our project, we were hoping to also consider this as an opportunity to explore how to do data work and AI differently, asking this question: can we reimagine data annotation as a site of co-constructed knowledge, community care, and resistance against exploitative work practices? So to help inspire us to figure out how to do this, we're inspired by intersectional feminist thinkers and work in feminist AI. And so specifically, feminist AI is attentive to power relations and the politics of knowledge production. So for example, while typical or corporate dominant AI development often removes data from its context and tries to standardize and sanitize it, feminist approaches would tell us to try to bring this context back in, acknowledging that no data or technology is ever neutral. It also pushes us to ask questions around who produces the data, to make that labor visible, to ask what data is missing and why. And it means also trying to think about what we build in the first place, so centering the lived experiences and perspectives of those with less power in society. And now I'll pass it to Yujia.
Thanks, Harini. Hi, everyone. I'm Yujia. I'm a PhD student at Brown in the Disco Lab. So I'm going to continue and talk about how we are approaching this process. So as Harini mentioned, there are a lot of valuable frameworks around alternative approaches to AI that incorporate feminist principles. From those frameworks, we've identified a set of principles to guide our exploratory data work. I won't go into details for the lack of time, and happy to expand them on the Q&A, but some of the principles that we're considering are to acknowledge labor, consider context and pluralism, center care, and foster collective dialogue. We're inspired by historical and modern feminist movements and organizing efforts. So similarly, we're taking the approach of a data workshop as spaces to facilitate collaboration, dialogue, and creative experimentation. So to give you a sense of our process and timeline, we organized a series of participatory data workshops between December 2024 and August 2025 with journalists, editors, activists, scholars, students, and most of them are part of this larger Data Against Feminicide network. In fact, when I was checking who is in the call, I see a lot of familiar faces. So really happy to see you all here again. So during those workshops, we build capacity around AI, data work, and journalism, and we collectively read and annotate news articles and discuss good and bad practices within them and how they are different or similar within different geographic and cultural contexts. After the workshops, some participants also continue to work to contribute and annotate more articles to form a larger data set of these practices. So I wanted to share some of the reflections and open questions we have that arose from this iterative process. For example, one of the biggest realizations that we have after running an initial multilingual workshop in English, Spanish, and Portuguese was that trying to build a universal taxonomy would lose a lot of the rich context from different reporting practices across geographies and cultures. As we were trying to address this, we designed language-specific spaces for more contextual conversations, and we are trying really hard to preserve the disagreements and different perspectives that people have from their own experiences. But we're also thinking about this open question that comes from that, which is what happens when we try to integrate these diverse perspectives into an AI systems when they're fundamentally designed to aggregate and average these perspectives. Another tension is around how we acknowledge labor. As the presentation from Data Labelers Association discussed, it is more than just paying them fairly, but thinking about how to enact care representation through this process as well. So for example, in our process, we engaged in transparent conversations with participants to see if we can determine together what compensation structure would look like and what can we provide beyond just monetary compensation. But there are a lot of logistical challenges with compensating people monetarily, and we're still reflecting on what is the good way of acknowledging labor by centering care instead of just reproducing the extractive and capitalistic labor relationships that corporate AI already has. So far, our project focuses on the data curation process, which is kind of the first step of the AI development pipeline. So now we have a really context-rich data set that capture the nuance of feminicide reporting across languages and contexts. The question then becomes, what do we do with this data? So we ultimately hope to use the data to develop AI tools to support feminist reporting of gender-related violence. For example, maybe it's a tool for journalists to incorporate good practice when they're writing, or a tool to help activists detect and raise awareness to harmful reporting, or something else for editors, scholars, or everyday newsreaders. We're intentionally very slow about this decision and wanted to make sure that this decision is a collaborative one that is made together with the communities. In fact, we started some of the brainstorming as part of the workshops to co-design AI and technological interventions. So what I'm showing is an idea board from one of our Spanish workshops. So as you can see, there are many great ideas that come up, but participants also discuss a lot of concerns around deploying AI in this very sensitive area. Some examples include bias, data misuse, and over-reliance on algorithms. So as we continue this critical engagements with AI and reflecting on these concerns, our thinking is that one of the very potential outcome, and that's equally valuable outcome, is that we're refusing AI in this domain or like very specific use cases of this domain. And that brings me to this point that while our project began with the goal of building data set for AI systems, we intentionally keep the entire AI development process very open-ended for communities to imagine what AI can be incorporated into their workflow, if anything at all. And we approach this AI development process as a useful heuristic device where building AI system is not the inevitable path or the ultimate goal. Instead, the goal is to build this community and have this educational experience opportunity for us to reflect on the broader role of AI in this space. And lastly, I just wanted to end by acknowledging all the participants that have joined the workshops and continue to work with us in this process to contribute their time, expertise, and knowledge into the data set and the taxonomies we're building. We're in the process of thinking about how to release this knowledge that we have into a public data set and public taxonomy. And we're really looking forward to continue working with all of these people to imagine what feminist AI could look like. And I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. I think it's an incredible presentation of a great work that you are doing and the importance of keeping it open. I mean, and not thinking about the inevitability of using AI or applying or having an end that is already described in the beginning. So that's really important. Thank you so much. And looking forward to see how this goes in the next few months. I have a couple of questions for Paty, just before, I mean, very briefly, because we need to close and move to the final activity. So, Paty, there were a couple of questions asking about how can the handling of the data by the judiciary can be improved in terms of the recording of violence that is reported. So in that sense, I mean, the relationship with the judiciary and how that could be improved. And the other question was about partnerships with national, regional, or municipal governments, if you are thinking about something like that, or if you are having any plans about that. So I know there are really big questions, but if you can let us know about some of the ideas that you have in mind, that would be great.
I will make a brief first recall that, as I said, in Chile there isn't legislation about these kind of crimes. So I honestly, when a woman goes to the police station, there isn't a protocol. Nobody takes down the information. The research police in Chile, there is a particular campaign in this month as in Latin American, that has to do violence with violence in November, there is a WhatsApp that today tells you, report it. It's WhatsApp that goes to an Excel spreadsheet. It's in the future, if there is a legislation, how the relationship will be drawn. So as you said before, it's a project that comes from resistance. It's a data variable that we didn't have in the beginning, from where in the Chilean territory are they are connected. We didn't think about making that question if you are in Santiago or any other city, because this means also on the other side to get an answer what you can do on security. Our institutions, there isn't, let's say, a radar of organizations that contribute to this. So that's why it's so important with women organizations that were already working on gender violence in general, or any other kind of groups, so that they can also be our support, a point of a start from our work. We are in the process of a government change. We are going to have elections next Sunday. So it's probably that the right will win, as it's happening in most Latin American countries. This makes it more complex to create, to come into agreements with authorities. It hasn't been solved yet, but we believe that this is a project of the group, of a collective project, just to keep it safe from the public academy. But that's a very good question, a great question.
Thank you so much, Paty. I know there were comments, and apart from the congratulations to the other projects in the chat, some of the comments were about the relationships with other organizations internationally for the data laborers associations. I don't know, they've been responding in the chat. The same thing for the narratives project. They've been asking about how to follow the many things that are coming up. And I know there's a link that it was posted in the chat as well. So I know we have many other comments and many questions that we want to talk with our presenters, but I'm really afraid that we have no more time. So before running out of time, I'm gonna say thank you to all of you, the presenters. It was incredible to listen to you. The recording is gonna be posted online, and we're gonna be able to listen again to the presentations and to talk to you and connect with you if necessary later. And I'm gonna give the floor to Elena to finish this presentation with an activity. But again, I am really privileged to listen to this presentation, and thank you again for being part of this event.
Thank you, Silvana. Thank you, everybody, Anita, Paola, also Joan, Ephantus, Paty, and Harini and Yujia for presenting your projects. I'm sorry I have a lot of noise where I am. We did plan an interactive presentation because we always like to have a lot of, participation, but we're really running out of time. So what I'm going to suggest is we have these questions, and we felt that after listening to all the incredible conversations that came today, that you all might have something to say about this. So what we'd like to do is invite you in the coming days, hours, minutes, whenever you have some time, to come into this Padlet. Sorry, my colleagues will put the link in the chat, and tell us what your thoughts are on these questions, or maybe other questions that came up during your listening and your participation. So the questions were, what does a feminist approach to AI actually look like? And I think some of the presentations we had today started to show us a little bit about that. We also saw how saying no to AI systems can be a possibility. And in the work of the Data Labelers Association, how we can push back on how AI wants to approach us and change that way of interaction. And finally, what can be our tools and our strategies? Again, we discussed some of these today, but you may know other strategies that you're using for refusal or adaptation or adoption and pushing back in the hegemonic way that AI wants to develop. So I'm going to leave you with this link and these questions lingering there. But what I'm going to do now before we all leave is give the space for Sophia, who has been scribbling away while we all have a conversation, to show us some of the thoughts that came up for her during this conversation. So the floor is yours, Sophia. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Well, let me show you how I'm doing. It's not finished yet. It will take some more work and some final tweaks and adjustments. Let's see if you can see my screen now. Oh, there. Yes. Can you see it now? Okay. So we began with a debate. I want to thank you so much. Well, I love these events because I learn so much and I find it so important and so interesting. So I congratulate you on your work and thank you for that. This was the debate. We went through responsibility, accountability, creating networks. There was a more philosophical thing, analyzing the historical context where we live now and how we can question, challenge new technologies and their uses, and what that implies, and the biases that stem from the biases, the people making them. And then this possibility of rejecting the use of artificial intelligence, valuing technological autonomy, understanding that the algorithm just shows what we already are. And I want to keep this message at the end of creating conditions for life, which was like ultimately what we just need, as a species in every single aspect. And then there was this part where you shared all the experiences. All the projects were very interesting. I had Googled them before the session today. Sophia, we share the name, this project from Chile, this feminist Chilean chatbot. I thought that was very interesting, how that was a very local thing. I need more color. They just like a horizontal blog. It will look better later. And then this aspect of it being a resource of support for activist women, and that will create, community. The importance of anonymity in this context, I also found very interesting. And then this exploration of the data labelers, people. This is a whole world I was unfamiliar with. And I found it very interesting and important.
Working condition of these people. Sorry. And then we have the narratives, IA narratives, to use artificial intelligence to support media and try to find a way to that the bias do not affect information, to find a better way to use language. And I think that this is this kind of explorations, and what comes in the future will round out the image. Thank you, Sophie, so much. Beautiful on your work every year, as you can see.
Sorry, I'm supposed to be speaking in English. Anyway, you will have seen in the chat loads of appreciation for the work that you do. And I was just going to say just a few points of orders, that this all is being recorded. We will share the recording. Sophie will work on finalizing this draft, and it will be made available in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. We will share everything that you all shared in the chat so that people can have it. And so the last thing to say is thank you, everybody. We want to recognize all the people that work with us on the Data Against Feminicide project, and also the great work that the Latin American Feminist AI Network is doing. Want to invite you, if you haven't joined already, we're running a course that starts next Monday, if you're interested in data and feminicide theory and practice. And last but not least, I'm sure Paola would like to say, but I'm not going to give her the voice because we need to finish now. The Latin American Feminist AI Network has an open call for proposals that are looking at ways to imagine other ways to do artificial intelligence that are more community-centered and are more and that are more in tune with life, living, and vitality rather than the necropolitics of capitalism. So if you are working on a project in Latin America, go and visit the website. The website has been linked in the chat, but you can also Google it. It's the Latin American Feminist AI Network. So thank you, everybody, but most of all, thank you to our interpreters who always make possible these crazy events that we organize. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all the interpreters who have, facilitated our sharing everybody this event. And of course, thank you to everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to see the enthusiasm and interest. And we're sorry always that it runs out of time. But feel free to put your comments in the Padlet, and then we keep reading each other, keep communicating with each other, and trying to make sure that technology remains in our hands and feminist.